Okay. Oh. Well, this is very odd. So, yeah. Hello. Yeah. How are we all doing today? Feeling good? Good. My name is Mark Hayton, and that guy over there is Phil Mercy. For some reason, he will be joining me later. We're from Nokia. Remember us? There you go. Predictive indicator. There you go. That's one of them. I'm going to talk about analytics-driven culture cohesion, or we're going to talk about it today. This is me. I am the global lead of organizational development analytics. I think we've all got a lot in common when we talk about analytics-based job titles. They just don't know what to call us. I work on the voice of the employees. This is a multifaceted approach to try and articulate what it is that our employees go through on a day-to-day basis, how they experience us as they go through the hire to retire cycle, how they react in the census, and how they react when we do things like decision-making or personality tests or aptitude tests. What we try to do is get as holistic a picture as possible about what it's like to work at Nokia, what it's like to experience that. What I also do is the Organizational Development Analytics Survey Network. So through no fault of my own, I collaborate with a lot of other people outside of HR, one of them is over there, to try and expand that picture, not just from a people perspective, but how the people perspective fits into the organization. This is incredibly important as we get to later on. This is kind of one of the key things. And then I build frameworks. Frameworks is a weird thing. It's kind of like, I try to ask people why they think about the thing that they think about, which is a difficult thing to say. Let me try it again. I ask them what they're thinking and why. We do statistical tests. We do text mining and data analysis. We do Bayesian belief networks and a bunch of other really cool stuff that's really also boring. Kind of became cool recently. But what we do is try to work out when we are analyzing the data that we have or the people that we have, what's the built-in prerequisite or predefinition that we're working from. Today, I'm going to do three things, or I'm going to do two things, and then we're going to do one together. I'm going to describe the conditions under which we needed to change the game and the choices we made in terms of people analytics. I started life thinking that I worked for finance when I was brought in to do strategic resourcing. But basically, when we did OD, let's say 5 or 6 years ago, we were fundamentally a survey team, and we switched into an analytics department. I'm going to lay out the current state and the choices that we made, and I'm going to point out one or two things that I think should be helpful to you guys about what it is that needs to happen for you to make that change. And then I'm going to open up to collaboration. That's when I'm going to bring my good friend on the stage. So, change in the game. We faced, in 2015-16, 3 fundamental areas of disruption. The first one was transforming Nokia. This man is Risto Siilasmaa. The book he wrote, Transforming Nokia and the Story of the Paranoid Optimists, is a pretty awesome read. He goes through a lot of the conflicts between traditional management and leadership styles and a modern working and business environment. So there's a lot of like really awesome anecdotes about executive level behavior and misbehavior. I think his favorite, his core phrase from this one is, bad news is good news, no news is bad news, and good news is often no news, which is kind of funny. I like it. It talks about how it is that we deal with problems and how we deal with information when it's not going our way. The disruption that we had at that time, was that we sold our devices and services, the mobile phones, the handsets, the thing that you guys all remember. We sold that to Microsoft, and we bought Alcatel-Lucent. So in the space of 12 months, we went from a 35,000 people company that everybody in the world kind of knew to a 100,000 people company that nobody knew. And I think most of you, when you came here today, probably thought that we still sell phones. No, we don't. When we bought Alcatel-Lucent and we focused specifically on the infrastructure and the networks business, we came to a pretty quick realization, which is that when you expand your employee base by as much as we did, if you don't get it right, the culture will eat your strategy for breakfast. And I understand that that's a terribly ugly visual, but I like it. The second area of disruption. Oh, sorry, would you like me to? You want to hit that? No, you can do it. Go for it. It's all right. Okay, so the second area of disruption was a theoretical challenge. Has anybody used Net Promoter Score? A couple of people. How do you like it? 7.2, 7.3, something like that. We used Net Promoter Score in the early days, and with one question, we sort of blew our minds out, because we asked the Net Promoter Score and we tallied up the strongly agrees, strongly, like the really agrees, the guys we classed as promoters. We took the 1 to 6s, the detractors, the guys who really didn't like us, and we took that sticky middle that we had to convince, those neutral guys of 7s and 8s. And we said, basically, so if you're a promoter, how will you promote us? And the look we got back was, what do you mean? And it's like, well, you're a promoter. How are you going to promote us? Now, if you think about it, particularly from the employee perspective, something like recommending your company as a place to work, what are the circumstances under which that happens? So, I mean, a lot of it depends on the job, a lot of it depends on the person, a lot of it depends on their personal situation, a lot of it depends on the discussion that you have, and a lot of it depends on your personality. Nokia has a lot of Finns. Finns tend to get there in that sticky middle, that's 7 and 8, and there's not much you can do to get them up to 9 and 10, because they don't agree with anything really strongly, unless it's a hockey World Cup. The next challenge we had theoretically was discretionary performance or discretionary effort. So the old school definition of employee engagement was discretionary effort. So going above and beyond, giving 110%. How many of you accessed your emails before 8 a.m. today? How many of you have taken a call after 6 p.m.? Okay, is it discretionary? Did you do it because you love the company? Or did you do it because that's the way work is these days? Both? That's good. It's not something I can measure, not too easily anyway. The third problem we had was, with the traditional census approach, when we measured engagement, what we actually did was discuss with every other department inside HR and a couple of departments outside of HR how many questions they wanted to ask, and then we gave them each a question, and then we rated roughly the questions in a kind of a rank order. And what we found is, it's really easy to agree to a lot of different kinds of questions, and it's really hard to agree to a lot of other kinds of questions. So health and safety, it's really important, yeah? 95, 96% every time. It is. The only time it really matters, though, is when health and safety is actually needed, and that's not all the time. Career opportunities, salary, is it really easy to agree to those? Not all the time. Why not? Well, everybody wants more money. And there's usually, in any organization, there's almost always more people than there are opportunities. It's pretty simple. So what do we get when we look at these things together? 76%, 80%? That's your engagement index, and what does it tell you? It tells you more about the questions that you're asking than the results that you're looking at. So we had like a really huge theoretical crisis, particularly when we think about things like engagement and loyalty, emotional commitment, promoters, and all this stuff. We looked at it, and when we did the qualitative stuff, we couldn't make it add up. The final problem that we had, crisis that we had, was the rigidity of the census survey. So start to finish, from the time that we had the idea of the questions until the time that the manager had something in their hands with which they could make a plan, it took 9 months. I know, 9 months. It was unbelievable. And we gave them a whole bunch of stuff for that process, right? It took ages just to, agree the questions. And then, when we started to ask about things like, hey, GDPR is coming up, privacy is important, the answers we got back didn't give us a lot of confidence. And then when we tried to analyze the data, or when we tried to get it so that we could start to work statistical models on it, it took ages to get the data. And when it came back, it wasn't complete. And when it wasn't complete, it didn't match the reports that they gave us. And we started to sort of ring the alarm, which is like, what's going on here? We were, I think, maybe one of the first that had sort of tried to pull this thing apart. And when we did, the yarn just kept going. So these three things together, or these three areas together, brought us to a place where we needed to make a change. So what we did was we cut up the elephant. We said thank you to the vendor. We got a survey tool that was fit for purpose. We got a data modeling tool, and we got a data visualization tool. And that lead time from 9 months dropped to 1 month. I should say actually that I made this slide back in April. And what we can do today is close the survey, wrap up the database, and load a visualization tool with the models and statistical analysis in 3 days. 3 days is actually data checking and validation. So the load is actually 2 hours, 3 hours. And it's all possible. There's just a couple of key elements that you need to get right. The other thing that we found is that when we got 3 specific tools to do 3 specific jobs, we could do way more. So we weren't just stuck with one census. We could ask surveys or questions all the time. We could stratify samples. We could make different questions for different people, find the right questions and answers for the right parts of the company, and we could visualize and share. And one of the things that we're trialing at the moment is giving the information that we get to every employee. As we are today, we use Qualtrics. That's our survey tool. We run about 100 surveys a year. We do analysis across, inside this tool, we do analysis across different survey types. And we run also qualitative analysis of their text. They have a good text mining tool. And we have a great deal of, let's say, GDPR tests and compliance. So we like them. The data modeling tool that we currently use is SPSS Modeler. It's pretty good for data prep, data processing, data analysis, and statistical testing. It's also got a bunch of good text mining equipment that you can use, but you've got to build your own TAPs, which is a text analysis package, which is a bit tricky, but it's kind of cool. And our visualization tool at the moment, we're transitioning from Tableau to Power BI. We like Tableau. I like Tableau because of the aesthetics, because it looks really cool. It's not as scalable as Power BI. Power BI comes in the Office 365 package. Those are the tools that we've basically used. And actually, one thing to maybe highlight about this one is, if you take the vendor out entirely and you build tools for each composite part, you own the process. Nobody has anything that you can't replace because you've got the rest of it. And this is like a real key. If you want to stop being a survey team and start being an analytics department, you need to work with the way you gather data, the way you process and model and analyze, and then the way you visualize and tell the story. I think that takes us from about 2015 to 2017, which is when my good friend should join me on stage. This is Phil Mercy.
Thank you. Oh, which one's up? That's forward. Hi there, can you hear me? Okay. Yes, I'm Phil Mercy. I'm a Six Sigma Master Black Belt, which basically means my role is to solve business problems. That's better. Thank you. It's magic, isn't it? New technology. Thank you. Solving business problems with mathematics, basically. That's what I do. I get to work on some cool stuff. I sort of float around looking for business problems to engage with. One of them, which we'll go into some detail with, is voice of the customer analytics, which had a similar crisis, which we could engage with and solve. We're going to look into that. That led to a very interesting piece of work where basically we're able to model the movement of market share in things like our own market, the mobile infrastructure market, but in more general terms in general markets too, based on your knowledge from the customer and what their experience is telling you. Currently, I guess we've gone from that very high-level view to looking more inward at how teams can learn to be more value creative, more impactful. What's the science behind that? And that's where I'm working with Mark, as you can imagine. So 3 things today, similar kind of crisis. I'm going to describe why a different approach was taken to customer survey science, completely different to what we've seen before, a bit audacious, as I'm sure you'll probably see. I'll take you through a timeline of when it all happened and what happened when, because it has led to some significant successes within Nokia in terms of adoption of this stuff. Then we're going to sort of open the way to describing why that's become important for the culture of the company as a whole and work with people in HR and that type of thing. So, a timeline. What are we showing you? Well, I have to label this axis here as relative customer experience because I can't use the actual name at the moment as it's under IP. Similarly, these 3 things, whilst the 3 entities are key players in our market, the mobile infrastructure market, I can't name them, although you could probably have a shrewd guess as to what's going on. Clearly, this is like an 8-9 year story so far, but it's a journey which is still unfolding. Let's take you through some of the key milestones. The whole thing started when I was working at Motorola, and we were bought by NSN, and I was asked to sort of help out a few teams. As usual with such instances, you've got 2 teams for every function. 2 leaders for every function, 2 different ways of doing things, 2 tools. Everything's a mess, right? And it was exactly the same for customer experience surveys. There was a Motorola customer experience survey team. There was a NSN customer experience survey team. Strangely, they agreed on just about everything. Motorola threw away their survey and said the NSN one's far better. But all of them agreed that all the metrics were rubbish. They'd lived with satisfaction for several years. It was rubbish. They'd lived with customer loyalty. It was 7.1 every year. But surprisingly, China was always 8.5. And Europe was always 6.2. And they all never changed, but this overall average never changed either. So all the senior leaders were just starting to look at customer experience and saying, why are we funding this? What are we getting out of this? Nothing ever changes. So these 2 teams, rather than just fight it out, actually said, can we develop a new approach? So we did. I got involved. The main problem with those set of metrics, and that includes Net Promoter Score as well, is they suffer from cultural bias. So if you're doing things across various territories and regions, you're going to encounter the fact that different groups of people, for whatever reason, whether co-located, have a common culture, tend to address a survey scoring scale in the same way. Some people score high, some people score low. If all you do is take an average of the raw score, what you're measuring is how they use survey scales, not what the answer to the actual question was. So we worked out a way where we can mathematically correct for that bias, and indeed do benchmarking as well into the bargain, because we're asking questions which balance it out about our competition as well. 50% is the benchmark. It would have been the benchmark in 1910. It'll be the benchmark in 2030. 50% is the benchmark. It's the average customer experience. All those measurements are relative to that average customer experience. Having a metric isn't enough, though, as several people have already said on the panel today. Just having a metric and being accurate doesn't engage anybody. We realized we was onto something and created 2 things. One was a democratic analytics platform, which people could access all this data and make it relevant to themselves, sort of the data underlying behind this. And the second thing was to create a philosophy they could believe in, where what they were seeing in the analytics related both to them and their work and the customer and the customer experience too. So effectively, the analytics is acting like a translator between the data you can get and everybody's day job. That's when you start to build credibility amongst your employees and your workforce, because they all have access to the data. We trained 45,000 employees in 2014. There was 3 compulsory courses, ethics, health and safety, and this pocket of work here. So that was good. We had the employees on board, but of course that hasn't got your senior leaders on board. Up until this point, everybody was driving this metric because clearly it's a good thing to do, but nobody had actually proven what the business success was. So around about this time, we went back to first principles and created a model about how what we're measuring here, what we can think of as value, the value you provide to your customer, influences how market share moves. And the comparison of value between the competitors plus their starting point within a market pretty much describes how a market will evolve over time. After 3 years' worth of hindcasting with sort of model and market data, we'd pretty much proven beyond all reasonable doubt that our model was describing how a market works. And we were measuring the thing which was apparently driving the market. So now we've got credibility with our senior leaders too. But even that's not the end of the story, because somebody said impact. I think Steve said impact in his presentation earlier. That's absolutely spot on. So what started to interest me now was, if this is so important for a market, this thing, and we can measure our customers' perception of it, their experience of it, who creates it, and how do we get involved in that? So we started working together on something which we call cultural dynamics, which was basically measuring how culture changes. How can you describe culture mathematically, which is a good academic exercise, right? What I'm about to show in a minute is employee versus customer perceptions, because we're joining in forces now, Mark and I. And where we are at the moment is looking at team analytics. Okay.
Fun stuff.
Sorry?
The fun stuff.
Thank you. So, if we got really good employee data now because Mark's a genius, and we've got some pretty good customer experience data because we changed the way we did that stuff, we should be able to look at the two and get some insight from it. Is everybody going to agree with one another? Is it going to be completely different? How does the employee perception relate to the customer experience? Let's create some areas. I'm going to create an area here, which I'm going to call the green fields area. If any topic lies in that green area, then the employee perception, good or bad, aligns with the customer experience of that exact same aspect of how you do business. If I'm up here somewhere, it's what I've called the blue moods thing. So the employees are gloomy about this particular area, but the customers think you're actually pretty good. Down here is rose tints. The employees think, hey, we're the best thing since sliced bread. Here, can't touch us here, but obviously the customer disagrees. So this is really interesting stuff now. So what we can plot here is some areas of consensus. So a large number of topics are where the employees actually do agree with the customer experience. So for Nokia, just crudely, you could say both employees and customers see Nokia to be a company that executes with quality. This is something Nokia is good at. So relatively speaking, of course, because all things are relative in this universe, Nokia is not such a technical leader. It's not very flexible or agile. It's a bit stuffy, basically. Relatively speaking, tends to overcommit to things, talks a big talk. Employees and customers agree with that. Where do you tend to get misalignments? Because that tells you something too, something really important, in fact. What you tend to get up in the blue moods area is relationship topics about the relationship between the company and their customers. Employees tend to feel the customer hates you. Well, customers are thinking, hey, you're a good supplier, more often than not. Down in rose tints are a whole selection of topics which are more to do with cost matters. We're the most efficient thing going. We're really executing here. Customer says, you're just way too expensive. So, the interesting thing is, how would you use data like this then? Because your obvious instinct is to go into this area first. Let's move it. Let's become more agile. But actually, the big first priority matters are down here. Nobody's going to fix the cost matter thing because we all think we're brilliant already. So that's the first lesson, right? Second lesson is we can cheer everybody up a bit by telling them how much our customers love us a little bit. Then you start getting into these areas and understanding, the nature of your business. But the other obvious thing, of course, is you're now in the area of prediction. In some of these areas, the more practical areas, the employees know before the customers experience it. So that's something you can definitely leverage.
So if you think about the way the business works, I know you guys probably can't see so much of the categorizations that you've got, but when you would run a standard employee survey, your improvement items would generally be your bottom three. So they'd be like technical brand, customer orientation down here. If you ran your customer survey thing, it would again be your standard bottom three. So it'd be execution oriented and let's say agile, brand agility there. But what we're saying here is actually that both of those things or those focus areas are going to confuse people and they're not going to bring you success with the customer. Because the thing that you need to focus on the most are the bits where your guys think they're great and the customer does not agree. So we'd be focusing on product delivery and timely support. And this is the simple case to make that says, look, this is where we think we're awesome, where the customer is demanding us to improve.
Yeah. So, have we got the end of the day yet? No, but go on. Interject.
After you.
After me. What am I going to say? He's going to interrupt again, isn't he?
I am. Yeah.
Right?
So we're calling this. So the start of the presentation was called analytics-driven culture cohesion. And we're coming back to that now because what are we doing here when we're putting the customer perception next to the employee's perception? Well, we are.
Well, basically, thank you for including me. It's basically what is the role of analytics. So we've done some detailed stuff, as hopefully you've seen, and it is being enacted. It's all really good. Now just go up to 30,000 foot. What are we actually doing? We've got to the point where we are actually measuring the customer experience accurately. I know that because the measurement we have relates to market share directly with high accuracy. So we are revealing what the market values, okay?
And then we're measuring the employee experience with a relative amount of purity in the terms of the market to reveal what our culture values.
It's almost like we practice this, isn't it?
We should have practiced this, but if there was one slide to practice, it was this one.
So what we're actually doing is linking employee and customer analytics. It's clearly cause effect, that type of thing. And we're aligning people to the needs of the market. So what we're actually doing is answering what is the role of analytics. The role of analytics is actually to drive the culture, not measure it. Thank you very much.